My name is Gregory, and this happened last December, a week I don't think I'll ever forget. I was home alone for the entire week. My girlfriend had gone to stay with her parents for the holidays, and I stayed back because of work. I live in a small, quiet town in upstate New York, the kind of place where houses are far apart and streets go dead silent around Christmas. Most of my neighbors leave town for the holidays. That year, I had the entire street to myself. At first, I liked the idea, the quiet, the privacy. I thought it would be peaceful, a week of rest, catching up on shows, enjoying the calm that only winter nights can bring. But what happened during that week still hasn't left my mind. It lives there, stuck, replaying itself when the house gets too quiet. It was my second night alone. It was around 6:30 p.m., already completely dark outside. Snow had been falling lightly all day, covering my yard and driveway in a thin white layer. Everything looked frozen and still. I was in the kitchen making a simple dinner, pasta and chicken. I'm not much of a cook. My girlfriend usually handles that. I turned the TV on in the background, not because I was watching it, but because the house felt too empty. The silence felt heavy, like it was pressing against the walls. While I was eating, I heard something strange. At first, my brain didn't register it. It took a few seconds to understand what I was hearing. Singing. I muted the TV and listened. The sound was coming from outside. As it grew clearer, I realized the person was singing Jingle Bells. My first thought was that maybe some kids were messing around, but the voice didn't sound like a child. It was deeper, slower, off-key. It sounded like a grown man. I stood up and walked toward the front door. With every step I took, the singing got louder. By the time I reached the door, it sounded like the man was standing right on my porch. I felt a tight knot form in my stomach. Still, I tried to stay calm. I told myself it was probably just a Christmas caroler, even though I'd never heard of a grown man doing it alone. I opened the door. Standing under the glow of my porch light was a man who looked about 35 years old. He wasn't wearing a hat, and his coat looked far too thin for the freezing weather. Snow clung to his boots. But the strangest thing wasn't his clothes. He was staring straight down at my welcome mat, completely focused on singing, as if I didn't exist at all. I forced a polite smile, unsure of what else to do. He didn't look aggressive. If anything, he looked confused, vacant. For a moment, I even wondered if he had some kind of mental disability. He finished the song. I waited for him to say something or leave. Instead, he took a breath and started singing Jingle Bells again from the beginning. Same slow rhythm, same wrong notes. This time, he lifted his head and locked eyes with me. That's when my smile disappeared. I stood there awkwardly, pretending to listen. Seconds turned into minutes. He didn't stop. He just kept looping the song over and over. I checked my phone. Almost 4 minutes had passed. Finally, I told him thank you, as politely as I could, and slowly closed the door. The singing didn't stop. I walked back to the table, trying to ignore it, but it was impossible. Hearing the same song sung the same way right outside my house, it felt invasive, wrong. 10 minutes passed before it finally went quiet. The sudden silence made my heart jump. I walked back to the door and looked out the window. He was still there. Now he stood at the end of my driveway, facing my house, completely still, not singing, just staring. That felt worse than the singing ever did. I cracked the door open and told him he needed to leave, that this was private property. He didn't move. I warned him I would call the police. Still nothing. I didn't want to actually call them. Something about him felt off, not criminal yet. So I went upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and tried to relax.
Before getting into bed, I checked the window. He was gone. I felt relief wash over me. I assumed the threat worked. About 20 minutes later, I heard it again. Jingle bells. This time, it was coming from my backyard. I ran to the window. He was standing directly below my bedroom, in the snow, already looking up at me, singing, smiling. I yelled that I was calling the police. The singing stopped instantly. For 3 seconds, he stood there in silence. Then, he sprinted, straight toward my back door. What followed didn't feel human. He screamed, a raw animal sound that echoed through the house. He slammed into the door, kicked it, shook it violently. I could feel the impacts from upstairs. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a weird man. He was trying to get inside. I called 911 while grabbing a baseball bat. I locked myself in my closet as the screams and banging continued. Every second felt like the door would break. Then suddenly, silence. I stayed frozen until police arrived. They found deep footprints in the snow leading from my yard into the woods. The officers didn't seem concerned, but I was, because that man never came back, at least until I know of.
This is something I still think about, even now. It happened when I was 6 years old, just a few days before Christmas. I had recently celebrated my birthday in November, so everything from that time still blends together in my memory. Birthday excitement, Christmas lights, sports jerseys, and what should have been some of the happiest days of my childhood. That birthday week was memorable. It was the same day as the famous Odell Beckham Jr. catch. Everyone talked about it non-stop. I lived with Cowboys fans, but I was a Giants fan. I didn't even fully understand football, but I understood that moment was special. Mostly, I was just happy to be 6 years old. For my birthday, I got tickets to the Dallas Mavericks game. It was going to be my first NBA game ever. We lived outside Dallas, and even though I was a Cavaliers fan, I liked the Mavs too. I was excited beyond words. Christmas came a few days later, and I got a brand new Odell Beckham Jr. jersey, plus Mavs beer. I felt like the luckiest kid alive. On December 27th, we went to the game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. The arena felt massive to me, loud, bright, alive. The Mavs won, and I couldn't stop smiling the whole way home. A few days later, we went again. I didn't know it at the time, but it would be the last NBA game I'd attend for years. This time, our seats weren't as good. We were higher up, in a corner. Still, I was just happy to be there. The Mavs were dominating, and at halftime, my parents decided we should grab food. We stood in line for a long time. My dad went to another stand to get different food, and I stayed with my brother. While we were waiting to pay, I walked a short distance away, maybe 30 feet, to throw away some candy wrappers. That's when a tall man approached me. He looked down at me and asked, calmly, "Hey, are you lost?" I shook my head no. I didn't say anything. He looked around and said he didn't see my parents. Then he smiled and said, "Let's go find them." Before I really understood what was happening, he took my hand. I was 6 years old. I trusted adults, so I walked with him. He led me away from the crowd, up toward the nosebleeds. He said we were going to the intercom so they could announce my name. That made sense to me at the time. We waited up there for about 10 minutes. Then, when there was no one around, he started guiding me toward an emergency stairwell, or maybe an elevator. I don't remember exactly, but I remember the feeling. A heavy, sinking fear. I suddenly remembered what my parents had told me about strangers. I looked at his hands. He had no badge, no uniform, nothing to show he worked there. When he let go of my hand to look at his phone, I ran.
I ran as fast as my legs could carry me. As I looked back, I saw him standing there, watching me, with a small grin on his face. I didn't even try to find my parents right away. I just wanted to be somewhere safe. I found my brother, who hadn't told anyone I was gone because he was afraid of getting in trouble. I told him I was fine. I didn't say anything else. The game ended. Everyone was happy. I wasn't. On the drive home, I stayed quiet. My parents thought I was just tired. I didn't correct them. Then a loud honk screeched behind us. I turned around. It was him. He was driving a truck with other men inside. I couldn't see their faces, just dark shapes. My parents yelled at them as they pulled alongside us, but the men only stared. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them everything. I didn't. That night, I went straight to sleep. Sometime later, I woke shivering. A light was flashing at my bedroom window. When I looked, I saw him, standing outside, shining a flashlight directly into my room. I screamed. My parents ran outside and searched, but they found nothing. They told me it must have been a shadow. I knew it wasn't. A few days later, on New Year's Eve, the doorbell rang. When my parents opened the door, I heard his voice. I was sure it was him. I told my parents everything. They didn't believe me. They said he was handing out flyers for a lost dog. A year later, there was a knock at my bedroom window. A note was left behind. It said, "This new year, you'll meet me again." I'm 16 now, and every New Year's Eve, I still wonder if I ever really escaped him.
It was early December when my wife, Marianne, suggested we do something special. We decided to drive north into the mountains and cut down a real Christmas tree. It was something we'd always talked about, but never actually done. Our 7-year-old son, Andrew, was thrilled. The idea of picking our own tree felt magical to him. The weather was cold and overcast. The sky hung low and gray, heavy with the promise of more snow. Somehow, that only added to the Christmas feeling. The drive up the winding mountain roads made me feel like a kid again. Andrew's excitement was contagious. Marianne had found a remote spot online, far from crowds, quiet, peaceful. When we arrived, there were no other cars in the parking area. A few light posts were scattered around, so it wasn't completely dark, which was reassuring. We still brought flashlights just in case. We parked beside a narrow, unmarked path that led into the trees. Snow from a previous storm covered the ground thickly, crunching loudly beneath our boots. Andrew jumped out immediately, throwing snowballs and laughing. I grabbed the flashlights and the axe I planned to use to cut the tree. We walked up the path, Andrew running ahead, pointing out trees he liked. The farther we went, the more the road behind us disappeared. Soon the only light came from our flashlights and a faint moon struggling through the clouds. At one point, I asked them both to stop. I wanted to hear it. The silence was absolute. No animals, no wind, nothing. If I'd been there alone, I would have already been uneasy, but with my family beside me, I pushed the feeling down. About 10 minutes in, we found a cluster of tall, full trees. Andrew ran around them, excited. Marianne leaned in close and whispered that she had a bad feeling. I felt it too, a quiet pressure in my chest, like we were somewhere we weren't meant to be. Then I heard it. Soft crunching behind us, slow, deliberate, not an animal. I turned around. A man stood about 20 feet back on the path. He was wearing dark clothes, completely wrong for the weather. No gloves. His hands were red and raw from the cold. His jacket was thin, more like a windbreaker.
His face looked pale and stiff, as if he'd been outside for far too long. Mary Ann pulled Andrew closer to her. When the man realized we were looking at him, he smiled. It wasn't friendly. He stepped closer and asked if we were looking for a Christmas tree. His voice cut through the silence in a way that made my skin crawl. Before either of us could respond, Andrew excitedly said yes. My stomach dropped. Mary Ann quickly said no, that we were just walking. The man stepped closer again, his movements slow, unnatural. He told us not to worry and casually mentioned that he wasn't a park ranger. The way he said it felt wrong, like he already knew why we were lying. He looked exhausted, hungry, desperate, like someone who hadn't slept in days. I told Mary Ann we should head back to the truck. As we walked past him, he stood still, smiling and nodding politely. Andrew kept asking if the man was following us. We told him not to turn around, but I did. Every time I looked back, the man was closer. I whispered to Mary Ann that once we saw the parking lot, we needed to run. When we reached the clearing, I told them to go. Mary Ann picked Andrew up and ran. I turned around to block the path, gripping the axe tightly. The man stopped walking and raised his hands halfway, still smiling. "I mean no harm," he said softly. "Why don't you get back to your truck now?" My heart skipped. He said truck. I hadn't told him what we drove. I didn't respond. I turned and hurried back. When I reached the truck, Mary Ann screamed. Both right side tires were slashed. There was no doubt who had done it. We locked ourselves inside the truck and called 911. Reception was poor. Mary Ann struggled to keep the call connected. Andrew sat silently, clutching his seatbelt, eyes wide. Then Mary Ann pointed toward the tree line. There were people standing there, at least 3, just shadows at first, unmoving, watching. Then 2 of them began walking towards us, slowly. The operator asked if I had a weapon. When I told her about the axe, she told me to use it if I had to. Andrew started crying. The 2 figures kept approaching, calmly saying, "We're here to help." They were dressed just like the first man, underdressed, worn clothes, unbothered by the cold. Then, suddenly, they turned and ran back into the woods. Seconds later, we heard sirens. Police lights flooded the lot. Officers arrived quickly, searching the area. More units showed up. They found footprints leading deep into the woods, spreading in different directions. They never found the men. The police stayed with us until a tow truck arrived. We sat in the back of a patrol car to stay warm. No one spoke. On the drive home, the silence felt heavier than the woods. We never went back. Even now, 10 years later, I still think about how long they had been watching us.
I still remember this night clearly. I was almost 9 years old. It was just a few days before Christmas. My parents both had errands to run that evening, and since I was close to 9, they felt comfortable leaving me home alone for a short time. My mom went to the grocery store to pick up things for Christmas dinner. My dad was working late, like he always did around the holidays. I was sitting on the couch, watching a Christmas movie, eating cookies near the fireplace. The tree was lit up, and the house felt warm and safe. Outside, it was already dark, and I could see Christmas lights blinking across the street. Everything felt normal. Then, the doorbell rang. It was late, random, and my mom had told me many times never to open the door when I was home alone. My parents never rang the doorbell anyway. They had keys. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I walked to the door quietly and looked through the peephole. There was a man standing on the porch. He was dressed as Santa Claus. The full outfit, red coat, hat,
beard, but something about him felt wrong. He wasn't holding presents, just a clipboard, and he was standing far too close to the door, like he was waiting for it to open. I whispered, "Who is it?" The man leaned closer, trying to hear me. Immediately, his voice changed, cheerful, fake. He said he was Santa and that he had gifts for me. He told me to open the door. I didn't believe him. I wasn't stupid. I didn't believe in Santa anymore, and my parents had warned me about strangers. I told him to go away. The man went silent for a moment. Then he asked, "Are you home alone?" My stomach dropped. I didn't answer. I stepped away from the door and went back toward the living room. I sat on the couch, holding a pillow tightly, staring at the TV like pretending nothing was wrong would make it stop. Then I heard the doorknob twist. He was checking if it was locked. My heart felt like it was going to explode. Seconds later, I heard movement at the back of the house. The back door. It happened so fast, I realized he had run around the house. I grabbed the phone and called my mom. When she answered, I spoke as fast as I could, trying not to cry. I told her someone was trying to get into the house and that he was dressed like Santa. She took me seriously right away. She told me she was coming home immediately and to not open any doors. She told me to stay hidden. I sat on the floor behind the couch, unable to move. I could hear faint sounds outside, footsteps, light taps. He was still there. Then I heard a car pull into the driveway. My mom. I stayed hidden until I heard the front door open. She rushed inside, locking it behind her, and called my name. I ran to her, and she hugged me tightly. She told me she had seen a man dressed as Santa walking down the street. She yelled at him from her car. He claimed he was asking for donations, but she didn't believe him. The police were called. Neighbors said he had knocked on their doors too. But I know the truth. He wasn't there for donations. He was there because he knew a child was home alone. Every Christmas, when I see Santa decorations, I think about that night and how close I came to something terrible.